Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the April 2025 edition of Socialism for All, and it's an audiobook and discussion of The Importance of Gold Now and After the Complete Victory of Socialism by Lenin from November 1921. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee at patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. There are links to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the video description. So this piece is the last in a collection that we've been doing over the last few weeks titled Lenin on Petty Bourgeois Revolutionism, which covers the topic generally of ultra-left or pseudo-left deviations which stem from a petty bourgeois rather than a proletarian outlook. This collection was originally published by the Novosti Press Agency of the USSR in 1979. And there's a link to that PDF in the video description, although in that collection they just use excerpts from the different readings. In the playlist that we're putting together, we're doing mostly the whole readings. Alright, so this one was written on the 5th of November 1921, first published in Pravda number 251, signed N. Lenin and published according to the Pravda text. The source is Lenin's Collected Works, second English edition, Progress Publishers, Moscow 1965. It was translated by David Skversky and George Hanna. HTML transcription and markup for the Marxists Internet Archive, Marxists.org, done by David Walters and R. Simbala, and it can be found at the Lenin Internet Archive within MIA, thanks as usual to them, for hosting this and thousands of other free texts online. So let's begin remembering that the context here is this is still slightly before the formation of the USSR, but toward the end of the Revolutionary Civil War. The best way to celebrate the anniversary of a great revolution is to concentrate attention on its unsolved problems. It is particularly appropriate and necessary to celebrate the revolution in this way at a time when we are faced with fundamental problems that the revolution has not yet solved, and when we must master something new from the point of view of what the revolution has accomplished up to now for the solution of these problems. What is new for our revolution at the present time is the need for a reformist, gradual, cautious, and roundabout approach to the solution of the fundamental problems of economic development. This, quote, novelty gives rise to a number of questions, perplexities, and doubts in both theory and practice. A theoretical question. How can we explain the transition from a series of extremely revolutionary actions to extremely, quote, reformist actions in the same field at a time when the revolution as a whole is making victorious progress? Does it not imply a surrender of positions, an admission of defeat, or something of that sort? Of course, our enemies, from the semi-feudal type of reactionaries to the Mensheviks or other knights of the 2.5 International, say that it does. They would not be enemies if they did not shout something of the sort on every pretext, and even without any pretext. The touching unanimity that prevails on this question among all parties, from the feudal reactionaries to the Mensheviks, is only further proof that all these parties constitute, quote, one reactionary mass, opposed to the proletarian revolution, as Engels foresaw in his letters to Babel of 1875 and 1884, be it said in parenthesis. But there is perplexity, shall we say, among friends too. Restore large-scale industry, organize the direct exchange of its goods for the produce of small peasant farming, and thus assist the socialization of the latter. For the purpose of restoring large-scale industry, borrow from the peasants a certain quantity of foodstuffs and raw materials by requisitioning. This was the plan, or the method and system that we followed for more than 3 years, up to the spring of 1921. This was a revolutionary approach to the problem, to break up the old socioeconomic system completely at one stroke and to substitute a new one for it. Since the spring of 1921, instead of this approach, plan, method, or mode of action, we have not yet adopted but are still adopting, and have not yet fully realized it, a totally different method, a reformist type of method, not to break up the old socioeconomic system, trade, petty production, petty proprietorship, capitalism, but to revive trade, petty proprietorship, capitalism, while cautiously and gradually getting the upper hand over them, or making it possible to subject them to state regulation only to the extent that they revive. That is an entirely different approach to the problem. Compared with the previous revolutionary approach, it is a reformist approach. Revolution is a change which breaks the old order to its very foundations, and not one that cautiously, slowly, and gradually remodels it, taking care to break as little as possible. The question that arises is this. If, After trying revolutionary methods, you find that they have failed and adopt reformist methods. Does it not prove that you are declaring the revolution to have been a mistake in general? Does it not prove that you should not have started with the revolution, but should have started with reforms and confined yourselves to them? That is the conclusion which the Mensheviks and others like them have drawn. But this conclusion is either sophistry, a mere fraud perpetrated by case-hardened politicians, or it is the childishness of political tyros. The greatest, and perhaps the only danger to the genuine revolutionary is that of exaggerated revolution, ignoring the limits and conditions in which revolutionary methods are appropriate and can be successfully employed. True revolutionaries have mostly come a cropper when they begin to write revolution with a capital R, to elevate revolution to something almost divine, to lose their heads, to lose the ability to reflect, weigh, and ascertain in the coolest and most dispassionate manner at what moment, under what circumstances, and in which sphere of action you must act in a revolutionary manner, and at what moment, under what circumstances, and in which sphere you must turn to reformist action. True revolutionaries will perish, not that they will be defeated from outside, but that their work will suffer internal collapse, only if they abandon their sober outlook and take it into their heads that the, quote, greatest victorious world revolution can and must solve all problems in a revolutionary manner, under all circumstances and in all spheres of action. If they do this, their doom is certain. Whoever gets such ideas into their head is lost, because they have foolish ideas about a fundamental problem, and in a fierce war, and revolution is the fiercest sort of war, the penalty for folly is defeat. What grounds are there for assuming that the great victorious world revolution can and must employ only revolutionary methods? There are none at all. The assumption is a pure fallacy. This can be proved by purely theoretical propositions if we stick to Marxism. The experience of our revolution also shows that it is a fallacy. From the theoretical point of view, foolish things are done in time of revolution just as at any other time, said Engels, and he was right. We must try to do as few foolish things as possible and rectify those that are done as quickly as possible. And we must, as soberly as we can, estimate which problems can be solved by revolutionary methods at any given time and which cannot. From the point of view of our practical experience, the Brest Peace was an example of action that was not revolutionary at all. It was reformist, and even worse, because it was a retreat, whereas, as a general rule, reformist action advances slowly, cautiously, gradually, and does not move backward. The proof that our tactics in concluding the Brest Peace were correct is now so complete, so obvious to all, and generally admitted that there is no need to say any more about it. The revolution has completed only its bourgeois democratic work, and we have every right to be proud of this. The proletarian or socialist part of its work may be summed up in three main points. 1. The revolutionary withdrawal from the imperialist world war, the exposure and halting of the slaughter organized by the two world groups of capitalist predators. For our part, we have done this in full. Others could have done it only if there had been a revolution in a number of advanced countries. 2. The establishment of the Soviet system as a form of the dictatorship of the proletariat. An epoch-making change has been made. The era of bourgeois democratic parliamentarism has come to an end. A new chapter in world history, the era of proletarian dictatorship, has been opened. The Soviet system and all forms of proletarian dictatorship will have the finishing touches put to them and be completed only by the efforts of a number of countries. There is still a great deal we have not done in this field. It would be unpardonable to lose sight of this. Again and again we shall have to improve the work, redo it, start from the beginning. Every step onward and upward that we take in developing our productive forces and our culture must be accompanied by the work of improving and altering our Soviet system. We are still low in the scale of economics and culture. Much will have to be altered, and to be embarrassed by this would be absurd if not worse. 3. The creation of the economic basis of the socialist system. The main features of what is most important, most fundamental, have not yet been completed. This, however, is our soundest basis, soundest from the point of view of principle and from the practical point of view, from the point of view of the RSFSR today, and from the international point of view. Since the main features of this basis have not yet been completed, we must concentrate all our attention upon it. The difficulty here lies in the form of the transition. In April 1918, in my article, The Immediate Tasks of the Soviet Government, I wrote, quote, "It is not enough to be a revolutionary and an adherent of socialism or a communist in general. You must be able at each particular moment to find the particular link in the chain which you must grasp with all your might in order to hold the whole chain and to prepare firmly for the transition to the next link. The order of the links, their form, the manner in which they are linked together, their difference from each other in the historical chain of events are not as simple and not as senseless as those in an ordinary chain made by a smith." Unquote. At the present time, in the sphere of activity with which we are dealing, the link is the revival of home trade under proper state regulation, (direction). Trade is the link in the historical chain of events in the transitional forms of our socialist construction in 1921 to 22, which we, the proletarian government, we, the ruling Communist Party, must grasp with all our might. If we grasp this link firmly enough now, we shall certainly control the whole chain in the very near future. If we do not, we shall not control the whole chain, we shall not create the foundation for socialist social and economic relations. Communism and trade. It sounds strange. The two seem to be unconnected, incongruous, poles apart. But if we study it from the point of view of economics, we shall find that the one is no more remote from the other than communism is from small peasant patriarchal farming. When we are victorious on a world scale, I think we shall use gold for the purpose of building public lavatories in the streets of some of the largest cities in the world. This would be the most just and most educational way of utilizing gold for the benefit of these generations which have not forgotten how, for the sake of gold, 10 million men were killed and 30 million maimed in the, quote, Great War for Freedom, the War of 1914 to 18. The war that was waged to decide the great question of which peace was the worst, that of Brest or that of Versailles, and how, for the sake of this same gold, they certainly intend to kill 20 million men and to maim 60 million in a war, say in 1925 or 28, between, say, Japan and the USA, or between Britain and the USA, or something like that. But however just, useful, or humane it would be to utilize gold for this purpose, we nevertheless say that we must work for another decade or two with the same intensity and with the same success as in the 1917 to 21 period, only in a much wider field, in order to reach this state. Meanwhile, we must save the gold in the RSFSR, sell it at the highest price, buy goods with it at the lowest price. When you live among wolves, you must howl like a wolf, while as for exterminating all the wolves, as should be done in a rational human society, we shall live up to the wise Russian proverb, boast not before, but after the battle. Trade is the only possible economic link between the scores of millions of small farmers and large-scale industry if there is not alongside these farmers an excellently equipped large-scale machine industry with a network of power transmission lines, an industry whose technical equipment, organizational superstructures, and other features are sufficient to enable it to supply the small farmers with the best goods in larger quantities more quickly and more cheaply than before. On a world scale, this if has already been achieved, this condition already exists, but the country, formerly one of the most backward capitalist countries, which tried alone directly and at one stroke to create, to put into use, to organize practically the new links between industry and agriculture, failed to achieve this task by direct assault, and must now try to achieve it by a number of slow, gradual, and cautious siege operations. The proletarian government can control trade, direct it into definite channels, keep it within certain limits. I shall give a small, very small example. In the Donetsk Basin, a slight, still very slight, but undoubted revival in the economy has commenced, partly due to a rise in the productivity of labor at the large state mines, and partly due to the leasing of small mines to peasants. As a result, the proletarian government is receiving a small additional quantity, a miserably small quantity compared with what's obtained in the advanced countries, but an appreciable quantity considering our poverty-stricken condition, of coal at a cost of, say, 100. And it is selling this coal to various government departments at a price of, say, 120, and to private individuals at a price of, say, 140. I must say in parenthesis that my figures are quite arbitrary, first because I do not know the exact figures, and secondly, I would not now make them public even if I did. This looks as if we're beginning, if only in very modest dimensions, to control exchange between industry and agriculture, to control whole-scale trade, to cope with the task of taking in hand the available, small, backward industry, or large-scale but weakened and ruined industry, of reviving trade on the present economic basis, of making the ordinary middle peasant, and that is the typical peasant, the peasant in the mass, the true representative of the petty bourgeois milieu, feel the benefit of the economic revival, of taking advantage of it for the purpose of more systematically and persistently, more widely and successfully restoring large-scale industry. We shall not surrender to sentimental socialism or to the old Russian, semi-aristocratic, semi-mujik, and patriarchal mood with their supreme contempt for trade. we can use, and since it is necessary, we must learn to use all transitional economic forms for the purpose of strengthening the link between the peasantry and the proletariat, for the purpose of immediately reviving the economy of our ruined and tormented country, of improving industry, and facilitating such future, more extensive and more deep-going measures as electrification. Marxism alone has precisely and correctly defined the relation of reforms to revolution, although Marx was able to see this relation from only one aspect, under the conditions preceding the first to any extent permanent and lasting victory of the proletariat, if only in one country. Under those conditions, the basis of the proper relation was that reforms are a byproduct of the revolutionary class struggle of the proletariat. Let's read that again. Under those conditions, which is to say, before the age of proletarian revolutions had begun, the basis of the proper relation was that reforms are a byproduct of the revolutionary class struggle of the proletariat. Throughout the capitalist world, this relation is the foundation of the revolutionary tactics of the proletariat, the ABC, which is being distorted and obscured by the corrupt leaders of the Second International and the half-pedantic and half-finicky knights of the 2.5 International. After the victory of the proletariat, if only in one country, something new enters into the relation between reforms and revolution. In principle, it's the same as before, but a change in form takes place, which Marx himself could not foresee, but which can be appreciated only on the basis of the philosophy and politics of Marxism. Why were we able to carry out the Brest retreat successfully? Because we had advanced so far that we had room in which to retreat. At such dizzy speed, in a few weeks, from October 25, 1917 to the Brest Peace, we built up the Soviet state, withdrew from the imperialist war in a revolutionary manner, and completed the bourgeois democratic revolution, so that even the great backward movement, the Brest Peace, left us sufficient room in which to take advantage of the respite and to march forward victoriously against Kolchak, Denikin, Yudenich, Pilsudski, and Wrangel. Before the victory of the proletariat, reforms are a byproduct of the revolutionary class struggle. After the victory, while still remaining a byproduct on an international scale, they are, in addition, for the country in which victory has been achieved, a necessary and legitimate breathing space when, after the utmost exertion of effort, it becomes obvious that sufficient strength is lacking for the revolutionary accomplishment of some transition or another. Victory creates such a reserve of strength that it is possible to hold out even in a forced retreat. Hold out both materially and morally. Holding out materially means preserving a sufficient superiority of forces to prevent the enemy from inflicting utter defeat. Holding out morally means not allowing oneself to become demoralized and disorganized, keeping a sober view of the situation, preserving vigor and firmness of spirit, even retreating a long way but not too far, and in such a way as to stop the retreat in time and revert to the offensive. We retreated to state capitalism, but we did not retreat too far. We are now retreating to the state regulation of trade, but we shall not retreat too far. There are visible signs that the retreat is coming to an end. There are signs that we shall be able to stop this retreat in the not-too-distant future. The more conscious, the more unanimous, the more free from prejudice we are in carrying out this necessary retreat, the sooner shall we be able to stop it, and the more lasting, speedy, and extensive will be our subsequent victorious advance. November 5, 1921. And that's the end of the audiobook. So I like this one, although I thought it took a while to get going. Despite that, there are definitely some very interesting and useful passages. By the way, if you're interested in exploring the relationship between reform and revolution, which was mentioned there at the end, I highly recommend Rosa Luxemburg's Reform or Revolution, which we have here on the channel as an audiobook. It's about 3 hours in total. Again, I highly recommend that, as it's a crucially important topic that a lot of people get confused about. Essentially, as Lenin said here, reforms are the byproduct of the revolutionary struggle of the working class, as the ruling class makes some concessions to try to placate the movement. However, these reforms are not a substitute for revolution, as the mere reformists would suggest. You're not going to reform your way out of capitalism. At some point, there is a definite break. It's not just a smooth transition where you take over the bourgeois state by, electing more people to it and so on. That said, things are not static along that path. There will be reforms that can improve the working and living conditions of the working class under capitalism in the short term, but as Luxemburg goes through in pretty good detail, the capitalists always try to roll those back as soon as it's politically feasible for them to do so, And even at that time, in the early 20th century, the struggles for reforms were kind of just resulting in pretty much holding on to the living standards that were already there, rather than having them rolled back further. So it was clear that, that struggle was only going so far, kind of treading water, and that the proletariat ultimately did have to take power in order to make further significant advances in terms of living standards and so on. All right, we're going to leave it there for now. What do you think? Leave a question or comment below, and we will continue the discussion there as always. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and thanks to the current patrons and Buy Me a Coffee supporters whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. You can sign up for just a few dollars a month or more, or make a one-time donation. Every contribution is encouraging, they're also materially helpful, and they allow me to spend more time on this channel than I'd be able to do without that support. So huge thanks there to the patrons. If you like this channel, find it useful, thank me of course, but also thank the patrons and Buy Me a Coffee supporters, and consider becoming one yourself. Beyond that, engagement counts, so like, share, subscribe, and remember, we can agitate and educate online, but the organizing happens in real life, so connect with your local left, get involved in local organizations, network with people around you, and look for projects where you can contribute and develop your skills, and overall, intensify the class struggle. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next video.